Hi, everyone. Today I wanted to talk about some of the books that can help you better understand the Shakespeare plays. And I'm not talking about influences, books that influence Shakespeare, but books, if read, will give you a better understanding of the plays directly. I'll talk about it in three categories. Um, One category will be the more technical aspect, I guess more about the words and the language of Shakespeare. And then I'll go through quite a few books of criticism of Shakespeare scholars. And I'm not necessarily talking about the judgment of quality of the Shakespeare works when I talk about criticism, but criticism as far as interpretation. Shakespeare scholars going through the plays and giving their interpretation of what either the plot means, what language means, what characters mean. So, and then lastly, I will talk about a couple of contemporary books published by other authors uh, that may or may not have been written by the Shakespeare author or authors himself or themselves. So I'll start with the technical. So to give you a better understanding of the words used in Shakespeare and the words used during Shakespeare's time, I would recommend getting this glossary. It is David and Ben Crystal's Shakespeare's Words, a glossary and language companion. So being a glossary, it obviously defines the words used by Shakespeare. It also gives a synopsis of all the plays of Shakespeare in the back. I believe it also gives a list of characters. I think it also has Venn diagrams of plays of how perhaps different settings and how the settings and characters interact. So I would recommend that. So again, David Crystal and Ben Crystal's Shakespeare's Words, a glossary and language companion. In particular, to better understand Shakespeare's words. Now, a work for me that helped me to better appreciate or more appreciate Shakespeare's genius with language. I think we need to know, well, what made Shakespeare such a genius? What was it about his use of language? And for me, a book that gave me a greater appreciation for his use of language is Shakespeare's Use of the Arts of Language by Sister Miriam Joseph. Now, in this book, she talks about figures. So the rhetorical figures used by Shakespeare, grammatical figures used by Shakespeare, topics such as invention, and other topics that would have concerned the dramatists and writers of Shakespeare's day. But it gave me a great appreciation of Shakespeare's mastery of these rhetorical figures, how he knew almost all of them, and how he was able to use them extremely well within the plot, within character. So again, Shakespeare's Use of the Arts of Language by Sister Miriam Joseph. Some folks have found the book dry. I didn't. I do enjoy returning to this book frequently, so I recommend it. Now I'll get into some books of criticism. I'll start with Robert Heilman. Robert Heilman wrote a book. He focused more on single plays. He may have books out there on all plays, but I don't know of that. But he did write one about Othello called Magic in the Web. Of course, that's referencing the handkerchief in Shakespeare, or in Othello, excuse me. But as the subtitle says, Action and Language in Othello, it describes the action of the play, the language of the play, why particular characters use certain language, the way they speak at particular times in the play, about the interactions of all the characters. So I do recommend Magic in the Web by Robert Heilman if you want a better understanding of Othello. Another great work by Robert Heilman is The Great Stage. The Great Stage is about King Lear. So this probably refers to the line, "The great stage of fools that we come to." I know I'm paraphrasing there, but so this is about image and structure in King Lear. So he does talk about the plot of King Lear, but I think where he excels is his discussion of image. For instance, clothing. What does clothing represent? Why do certain characters wear particular clothing? And what that represents for that character, or what it represents for the play as a whole. So again, that's The Great Stage, Image and Structure in King Lear by Robert Heilemann. Now, a few works that discuss the tragedies of Shakespeare. Of course, many critics, many people feel it's his tragedies that are his supreme works, and of his tragedies, the four works that most people consider his greatest are King Lear, Hamlet, Othello, and Macbeth. But of course, he has other works of genius, obviously. But the first one I'll talk about here is G. Wilson Knight's The Wheel of Fire, Interpretations of Shakespearean Tragedy. So he gives interpretations about the four major works, Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth. I believe he also does character comparisons. I think he has one of Brutus and Macbeth, and he also talks about Measure for Measure and how it relates to the Gospels. So a wonderful work of interpretation of Shakespearean tragedy. G. Wilson Knight's The Wheel of Fire, Interpretations of Shakespearean Tragedy. And for all these works of interpretation, you may not agree with what they say, with how they interpret plays, but every single work will give you some insight into the play or give you something to think about that you hadn't thought about before. So all of them are valuable in better understanding Shakespeare's works. Now, I think the Shakespearean work that started it off, or the one that most people find was the best Shakespearean interpretation of Shakespearean tragedy for quite some time, is A.C. Bradley's Shakespearean Tragedy. In this book, Bradley talks about what he feels tragedy is. He talks about Shakespeare's tragic period. This would have been the late 1500s to the early 1600s. His writings of, again, Hamlet, Othello, Macbeth, and and King Lear, excuse me. So definitely highly recommend this one as well. A.C. Bradley's Shakespearean Tragedy. A couple of works I want to discuss I don't have copies of anymore, but books I would recommend to better understand the Shakespeare works. One is Harold Bloom's The Invention of the Human. Why it's titled The Invention of the Human, Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human. I think why he titled that, and it's been some time since I've read it, but I think Bloom's thesis is that Shakespeare gave us the language to describe ourselves. So our internal states, our internal qualities, it was particularly in the English language, it was Shakespeare who helped define that. And then Marjorie Garber, I believe Marjorie Garber is a professor, a doctor at Harvard. She has a series of lectures on YouTube, which I would recommend checking out. But she also has a book called Shakespeare After All, and that's her interpretation, many wonderful insights about all of the Shakespeare plays. So I believe Harold Bloom's The Invention of the Human and Marjorie Garber's Shakespeare After All, they talk about all of Shakespeare's plays. Now, the work of criticism that I would recommend, that I found most enjoyable and most insightful, is Harold Goddard's The Meaning of Shakespeare. So Goddard talks about all plays, all of Shakespeare's plays. Some of his interpretations are, for some of the plays, are quite short. He doesn't give as much attention or devote as much time to certain plays, but the major plays he does. I do feel his insights into the plays are unmatched by other interpreters. Um, a wonderful work. So again, if I recommended one book to start with, it would be Harold Goddard's The Meaning of Shakespeare. So I believe you can find hardbacks, but I believe this is now published in 2 volumes in paperback primarily now. So again, The Meaning of Shakespeare. I would recommend that book most. But all of the ones I've mentioned are great books and give great insights into the Shakespeare plays. Now, 2 books published during the same time as the Shakespeare plays. So again, we're talking about the late 1500s and 1600s. The first one I'll talk about is Sir Francis Bacon's essays. So when you read the Shakespeare plays and you read Bacon's essays, you begin to find some similarities in language. You definitely find similarities in topics discussed. For instance, I think one of his early essays is on revenge. And Bacon not only talks about revenge, but he talks about a prince and revenge. So again, echoes of Hamlet. If you've seen my channel, you know my belief is Sir Francis Bacon is the Shakespeare author, and perhaps the primary author or editor of the works. Again, if you've seen my interviews with Jake Roberts, you'll know that Sir Walter Raleigh was a prominent author. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a total of 9 authors. This would follow the pattern of the 9 muses. So I'll just leave that at that. But Bacon's essays, if you read Bacon's essays, you will definitely see some parallels. You will definitely see topics discussed that are also discussed in the Shakespeare plays. Now, a book I almost consider the answer key to the Shakespeare plays. And a book I definitely recommend getting if you want to better understand what's happening in the Shakespeare plays. And that book would be The Anatomy of Melancholy by Robert Burton. Now, there are many people who feel that this is also as surprising or as amazing as it could be, that The Anatomy of Melancholy is also a work by Sir Francis Bacon. If you read The Anatomy of Melancholy, you will see topics discussed that are frequently discussed in the Shakespeare plays. I'm not saying that this gives credence to the theory that Bacon wrote The Anatomy of Melancholy, but in the Shakespeare works, you will often see a lot of his plays start with characters in melancholy. You will hear them discuss melancholy, being in melancholy. You will see in some plays, and I think King Lear, the words anatomize, anatomy. And I don't think he uses these words a lot. He may use melancholy a lot. I don't know if he uses anatomy a lot. But in the Shakespeare plays, Bacon would use words sparingly. If he wanted you to connect, if he wanted to, I don't know how to articulate this. If he wanted to connect certain works, he would not use words a lot. I think he would be afraid that words similar in works, I'm afraid he would be found out that he authored all these works. So I think, yes, Anatomy of Melancholy. So for an example, Othello is fast becoming my favorite play, and I was looking up number one, is jealousy a cause of melancholy? And I read The Anatomy of Melancholy, and sure enough, jealousy is one of the causes of melancholy. And then I wanted to look for, well, what cures melancholy? And I looked in The Anatomy of Melancholy, and patience. Robert Burton, for me, aka Sir Francis Bacon, talks about the cure for jealousy and the melancholy caused by jealousy is to be patient. And then I went back to the Othello work, and I couldn't believe how many times patience or impatience was referred to in the Othello work. So, so I definitely believe that the Anatomy of Melancholy is supposed to be used with the Shakespeare works. They are to be almost read in tandem to understand one another. So again, the Anatomy, almost dropped my mic there. The Anatomy of Melancholy by Robert Burton, but again, Robert Burton could be a pen name for Sir Francis Bacon, but I'll leave that up to you for what you believe there. So again, those are some of the works that I believe will help you better understand the Shakespeare works, or give you insights into the Shakespeare works, and lead you down a road to helping you interpret the works for yourselves. You know, what do you feel are some of the themes and issues discussed in the Shakespeare works? That's the beauty of Shakespeare. Let me know in the comments below if I've forgotten any other great works of criticism or any other works that would help all of us better understand the Shakespeare works. Now, I'm not talking about influences. I did do a video on the influences of Shakespeare, but just other works of criticism or other works that would help you better understand Shakespeare. Well, as a side note, the last one I'll leave, I think a book written in the 19th century that can help you better understand Shakespeare is Moby Dick. I think I will do a recording on Moby Dick in the future, but I do think Moby Dick is the greatest Shakespearean novel ever written. But I'll leave it at that. Please comment below, like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. That's all I have today. Thank you all. Bye.